Hola todos and welcome to the final analysis video of my 30-day Spanish challenge. So as you're going to notice when I'm going through the details, it's kind of week 4 plus, because obviously in 4 weeks there's only 28 days, and so I had to do a little bit extra. And I have to admit, I did go to 31 days because there were a couple of days this week where I didn't manage to have lessons because I was too busy or I wasn't feeling great. And so I did the extra day just to sort of fill in the gaps that I didn't do those other days. So yeah, technically 31, but we're, 30 days challenge has a much better ring to it. So I'm going to keep it as that. And as always, this analysis video is really going to be going into the fine detail and the behind the scenes of all of the nitty gritty of everything that I did to learn Spanish over the last week. And in the future, I'm going to do a big roundup analysis video of all of the data put together and all of the different activities and that kind of thing. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that one. And to kick things off then, we're going to be looking at the time breakdown. So this is where I really look at the amount of hours that I've studied broken down by day during the week. So you can see kind of the split of how I did things and stuff like that. And obviously when we're talking about timings and all of that kind of stuff, we need to sort of think about the total. And this week I was really amazed when I tallied it all up. Obviously there's a couple of extra days, but even that included, I managed to do over 52 hours this week, which I just think is incredible. It's the most that I've done in any week. And even if you kind of average it and make it the sort of 7 days, it's still higher than any other week. So I was really surprised because this week actually I had probably less lessons than every other week, because most days I could only fit an hour and some days I didn't fit any, and so I was really surprised to see that the overall number was much higher. So obviously I managed to make up for the lack of lessons with other things, and I really think that helped this week because I was focusing on mainly just trying to improve my sort of fluidity and pronunciation and that kind of stuff, just to sort of bring up my overall level a little bit rather than just sort of trying to sort of really hammer the grammar. I think that has worked really, really well. And when you look at the time breakdown here, you'll notice that there's a couple of days which are really, really low, but apart from that, every day has really been sort of around that really good level. And as you'll probably know if you've seen all of the other analysis videos, that's really how I like to study, is like kind of a regular amount each day. And obviously, if possible, I would love to, in my everyday studies, to do like intensive study a little bit every single day and then loads of extensive stuff all the way through. It's not always possible, but this time, because I'm doing this kind of challenge and having lessons almost every day, that has been really possible, and that's really helped me to make progress, I would say, a lot quicker than normal. Because if I'm only having maybe 1 or 2 hours of lessons a week, doing a couple of hours every couple of days of sort of intense study, then the amount of time I'm sort of really absorbing all of that quality information is much lower. So I think that's really had a big difference on my progress this time. To go into the intensive and extensive stuff. So as you'll know from all the other videos, if you check those out, and if you haven't, then go and have a look at those now. Basically, when I'm talking about this, the intensive is low frequency or low quantity, high quality. So lessons. I maybe only do 1 hour and I do a small amount of vocabulary or grammar, but the quality of that study is really, really high. And extensive is really the kind of immersion stuff. So I'm not focusing on learning every word and the real detail of every single phrase that I'm listening to or reading or anything like that, but I'm just kind of immersing myself and surrounding myself with a huge quantity of the language. And so I think it's really important to look at that combination, because too much of one and not enough of the other can really affect how quickly you're learning and stuff like that. So it's really something I like to sort of pay attention to make sure that I've got a good mixture, or at least that there is a good amount of the sort of intensive stuff, because that's the things that I notice that I'm normally missing, because the amount of time I have normally for lessons and stuff like that is quite limited, and so it's something I really want to look at. And this time you'll notice that the actual proportion of the intensive stuff is really, really low. And the reason for that is, one, because I had less lessons and the lessons are the only intensive activity that I had, but also because the overall time is so much higher and I filled it with so much more extensive stuff, that has also then reduced the sort of proportion of it. I think if I was trying to do this as a regular thing, I would like to probably increase that intensity just a little bit more. And so maybe what I would normally do is, in an evening, if I wasn't doing the lessons every single day, I would spend a couple of hours in the evenings where I'm not working, maybe doing some self-study, and that would then kind of increase that intensity. I wouldn't be having as much speaking practice, but I could be doing more intensive reading and listening and that kind of thing, which I think is the way I really like to study. And then that also then brings me questions that I can take to the teachers and clarify confusion and stuff like that. Whereas in this challenge, I didn't really have the opportunity to do that. So it was basically just the teachers kind of just throwing stuff at me and hoping that it sticks. Looking at the different skills then, we talk about these skills and it's the four big ones, speaking, listening, reading, writing. And with these ones, it's really important to remember that the proportion of the different skills should always represent your goals. So this week, actually, I'm not very happy with the proportion of the skills that I had because it doesn't really reflect my goals very well, because my goal really was to increase my speaking fluency as much as possible. So really my focus should have been on speaking and listening, because speaking is obviously the skill itself, and listening is the most transferable. Because if I'm trying to improve my pronunciation and my speaking, and in conversation listening is really important there, it's the most transferable. Whereas say if I was wanting to do writing, then I would want to be doing loads of reading, because seeing the written form, seeing the structures and maybe more complicated writing forms would really then be transferable into my writing skills. Whereas this week you'll notice that I had a huge amount, over half I think, of reading, which is because I was playing loads of video games. And so really, in terms of the immersion, it's still really good, but actually it's the wrong type of immersion for improving speaking fluency. So to be honest, the reason I was doing that is because at the end of this challenge I just got so tired, and I'm not burnt out, but I can feel that I'm very, very close to that. So now that the challenge is kind of over, I'm actually going to be taking a good few days of actually off away from all of my languages and doing any study, because I just need a bit of time to just sort of absorb everything that I've learned and sort of just take a step back. So the reason that I was doing so much of that is just because I really relax, and it helps me just sort of wind down and switch off when I'm after a long day and after I've had loads of lessons. And so I was just doing that in Spanish to still have that immersion, but some days I just didn't have the energy to stick on a series or something like that, because I just didn't have the attention that it kind of required, even just to enjoy the show. And I have done that in the last couple of days, but not so much, and so that's why that proportion is so high. And again, if I was trying to focus on really optimizing my learning process or the breakdown, I would really say that I would need to reduce that, and then a couple of times where I do have a little bit more energy, I would have to say to myself, okay, put the switch down and do something a little bit different. Either watch a series and maybe take some notes and maybe increase that intensity a little bit, and also focus more on listening and maybe focusing on really getting the accuracy of my listening comprehension higher, because that's something I would normally focus on quite heavily, because listening is probably one of my worst skills, and so I always have to put more focus into that. Whereas reading, actually, I seem to pick up much more easily. So that's why I kind of also, when I look at the breakdown of the different skills, I also think about my own abilities. So I would say to you as well that if you notice that, say for example, listening, like me, if listening is the most difficult skill for you, you should be focusing the majority of your attention on that, and then it will help all of your skills level out and get to the same level. And then also, actually, I've noticed, say in my Italian, I did this, and now listening is probably one of my best skills. So it's really important to sort of look at that and say, okay, if I'm finding reading really easy, it's good to do reading, but then I should be focusing my attention in other areas, because like I guess with my Spanish level at the moment, my comprehension, my understanding is really, really good, I would say, especially for my level, not in general. But my speaking ability is okay, but my vocabulary is super, super low. And Especially when I'm sort of listening to really informal speech, I still struggle with that quite a lot. So that's something I would need to sort of look at. So obviously at the end of this challenge, because I'm doing so many lessons, it's not really affected my overall progress. But if I only had one lesson a week and then the rest of it was filled up with just playing games and not really doing anything else that's sort of listening based, I would very quickly notice that my progress would really slow down. So it's more just kind of something that I'm thinking about now, moving into the sort of self-study stage after this challenge finished, that I really need to be making sure that I'm mixing up the activities and trying to do different things and focusing more attention on listening, because speaking is just going to be harder to find opportunities. And so, at least in my opinion, speaking isn't the most difficult skill out of all of them. I know it's kind of often, most people say it is. For me at least, the reason it's difficult is because I just don't have the opportunities I have with the other stuff. I can sit and listen to music or watch videos all day or every day if I want to, but speaking is really difficult to find the time and organize it, at least for me, to get as much frequency. And so in this challenge, it's actually, especially at the beginning of the process, it's the highest amount of speaking that I've ever had, and I really have noticed the benefits. And I would say actually my speaking confidence is much higher now, probably not far off my speaking confidence in Italian actually, and it's just because of the intensity of that speaking practice. But I would say listening is just a much harder skill, maybe not so much from Spanish because the sounds are very similar to other Romance languages that I've learned, but especially for stuff like, say, Japanese, I noticed that even just recognizing the sounds I find really tricky. And so that's something that I really have to work really hard on. And it's that feeling that, I don't know if anyone else has this, but when you're watching something in a different language and you have to turn the volume up to like 10 or 20 points higher than when you watch something normally, or you have to have headphones because when you're just having it from your speaker, the quality is just so low, it sort of almost feels like muffled or like your head's underwater or something. And so for me, that's why those listening activities are super important, because they just make it so that I can just recognize things the first time and start catching more of the detail and the information. Because once you can do that, then you can focus on the subtleties and the word choice and all that kind of stuff. So while I've been doing all of this analysis, that's really why I focus on the different breakdown of skills, because that helps me to understand what I've been doing, maybe what I need to focus on so I have a good balance of all of them. And like in the future, I probably would need to add in some writing because that's something I've really neglected. So I know my spelling, for example, is going to be really bad, which also affects my pronunciation because I'm not linking the spelling and the sounds together a lot of the time. And so that's something I need to really consider in the future. My final thoughts then. I'm really happy with my progress, and if you've seen the diary posts, you'll notice that I can speak Spanish, and I would say I'm really happy after 1 month of the level that I've achieved. Like I've sort of been talking about today, it's more about sort of understanding my process and understanding maybe that the way that I do things is working for me. And this is the kind of the idea that I think you have to kind of try everything. So, you know, I'm trying different activities, trying different things and realizing what I do like, what I don't like, trying different teachers as well. Especially with Baselang, I had the opportunity to test out loads of different teachers because I couldn't, until the very final week, I couldn't find one teacher I could work with consistently. And so that was really good because I noticed lots of different styles, and I found what I really liked and what I really didn't like in terms of exercises and also how the teachers used those exercises. And it was really interesting actually to see that when they were using the same materials, that was when the quality of the teacher really shone through, because you noticed the teachers that were really passionate and were really good at sort of bringing out extra conversation from the same materials, whereas others that would sit there and just kind of listen to you just reading conjugations and there was no sort of interaction. So it was a really interesting sort of journey in terms of understanding maybe what I need as a student. And I think that's really the thing that I've taken from this most, is that I really need to be forceful in the lessons and sort of say what I want and what I need, and if I'm not getting that, not be embarrassed to say do this instead. And I think they would never be offended, and actually they probably would really appreciate me saying what I need so they don't have to kind of guess in that case. So that would really be kind of my thoughts. And now it's kind of just going to be looking into the future and thinking how I'm going to continue to reinforce everything that I've learned and sort of maintaining it, and then sort of slowly building on that to get it to a really decent level, and, you know, maybe potentially in the future take an exam or try and get it to that advanced level. But at the moment, I think It's been an amazing journey, and I've done a lot of study. And talking about this week as well, having that one teacher, it was really interesting that I had less lessons this week, but the quality of what I learned was much higher. So it just does prove kind of my theory usually, is that when I find one teacher that I really like working with them consistently is really the best way of making progress, because they understand how you like to work. They understand that, like, for example, I like to do grammar exercises. I run through them really, really quickly, and then I like to explain what I think they mean, and I like to talk about them and stuff like that. So a lot of the lessons might be quite boring for the teacher, where I just sit there and say, okay, so this means this, or this is because of this, or this is an example. But that's how I like to learn. And once they understand that, there's sort of no friction there, and they're kind of ready for me to do that. And they kind of help me do that as well by saying, okay, can you explain why this sentence is subjunctive or something like that? So I think it's really going to be something that I can take forward into my other languages, as well as the intensity of the speaking practice. I think especially for languages like my Japanese, I think that's going to be a real benefit to my study, and I've just got to find a way of doing that without bankrupting myself, because I think with my private teacher, if I try and have 2 hours every day, I wouldn't be able to afford to do it for more than 30 days. And yeah, I think my wife probably wouldn't be very happy with me spending that amount of money just to learn a little bit of Japanese to watch anime. So, you know, different challenges of a self-learner in England when you're trying to learn other languages. So I hope you've enjoyed this analysis and this detailed view of the challenge. And also stay tuned for my unscripted progress video, where I'm going to be speaking completely in Spanish. No edits, no searching for words, no pauses, just you will see me press play and press stop at the end, and I'm just going to speak as much as possible, include all the errors, and then you'll be able to see the subtitles in English of what I intended to say. So as always, give the video a like if you enjoyed what I've been doing. Put a comment below if you've got any questions, or if you've got any ideas for any other languages or challenges you want me to take on in the future, and I will see you very soon. Hasta luego.